Hello, everybody, and welcome. Today we will be analyzing and commentating on *The Stranger* by Albert Camus. As you can see, I read it in Turkish, so it's yabancı in Turkish, but doesn't really matter. As I said, I will be going over what the book means, how I felt about it, what I think about the characters, and how it reflects Albert Camus' philosophy or understanding of the world as a whole. So let's begin. And first and foremost, I will be explaining the story in oral detail. And if I can't split this into parts, I will let you know, or at least write it in the comments or in the description if you want to not get spoiled. I'll write it down. Okay, our book starts off with Mersault. Mersault, I think that's the correct pronunciation, with Mersault's mom dying. And the most shocking entrance of probably all time, mother died today or yesterday. I don't know. And it starts with him getting a telegraph from the care home that he put his mom in, and he goes there. And but throughout all of the book, our protagonist Mersault is kind of indifferent or kind of refuses to fit in with any of the society's expectations, because when he goes to the funeral and sits by his mother's um, casket, he doesn't react. He doesn't cry. He drinks coffee, and he just doesn't care about it. Seemingly doesn't care about it. And overall, when he talks to people, he actively shows this. And when somebody asks him how old his mom was, he doesn't know. And this is actually true. He doesn't know how old his mom was, and he doesn't know. He just doesn't know. Says like something 60ish, 60ish, 70ish. And of course, people are shocked because her friends, his mother's friends from the care home came, and like the new husband that she found also came, and they were crying all over the casket. They took her, buried her, and throughout all of this process, people were just crying. But our protagonist seemed to be unfazed. And the following day, he goes home. I think he goes home, and he goes to the beach, and he meets Mary. Like it's a person that he had seen before, and they just kind of get along, get to know each other. Just they swim together, kind of get touchy, eat stuff together, go to the movies and comedy show, I think, yeah. And then after that, they go to a protagonist's home, and you know what? So the day after his mother's funeral, and he doesn't talk about it at all. He doesn't bring it up at all, and he doesn't care about the girl either, not that much. And just fast forwarding with the story, he meets a dude who beats his girlfriend up, and that dude asks for help with stuff, and he helps them. And then he learns that the friend that he made, Raymond, is also affiliated with some Arabian gangsters or something of the sort. So he tells him to watch out for it, and he sees Mary during this time. And there's also this other person, Solomon, I think, in their apartment, who beats his dog up. And one day he loses it. He loses him, and like the dog he beat up all the time, insulted all the time, and took care of for years. When it's gone, he's pained by it. I think that's like really interesting. But keeping on, and one day, yeah, with Raymond takes our protagonist and Mary to a beach house, to his friends. They hang out, they go to the beach, they have fun, you know, and they come back home, eat stuff, and then the person, like the husband that Raymond introduced them to, which is Mason, I think, or Mason, something like that. Mason, Raymond, and the protagonist go for a walk. They get encountered Arabian gangsters, and they get like the Raymond gets injured. They go back home, and our protagonist takes a gun, kind of just goes ahead and goes back alone and kills one of the Arabians. I'm really just putting the story as a very short version, but what you need to know is that our protagonist is indifferent to everything. One example I can give here is that when Mary asks him whether he likes her, he says no. And when Mary asks again if he wants to marry her, he says, doesn't matter. If you want it, yeah, sure, doesn't matter to me. And I think this is not indifferent. This absurd, like literally absurd approach to life is just baffling because he's like, why does that matter? Why does anything? Why will that matter? And he acts like nothing ever happens. He fits it with nobody. And it's just, damn. Because when he sees people like Raymond, his friend, beat up his girl, be cruel, he doesn't do anything. He doesn't even react. It's just he doesn't do anything, and he has absolutely zero reason to go back and kill the Arabian guy. By the way, and this will be in the next part of the story. And in the next part of the story, he kills the Arabian guy, and he gets arrested, obviously, and he's put into trial for his crime. And over time, the, the court talks about what kind of person he is more than the actual crime itself. And they just get infuriated because if they ask him, does he feel remorse for killing the Arabian? No. Does he like they ask about his mother, his reactions, his relationship with Mary? They find him very just immoral because he had like hung out with a girl right after the day of the funeral, and at the funeral he didn't care, and he helped a woman abuser, and then he just went ahead and killed that Arabian guy for no reason, and he shot him 5 times at like when he was laying. Like, why would he do that? And they like come up with reasons for themselves, but he says no, this isn't related to my mother. I There is no reason. And he's very calm about this. He doesn't lie, he doesn't act, he does nothing. And sorry. And people are obviously infuriated because like they find him, like they see him as a monster, as the monster. The newspaper people, the jury, the judge, even his lawyer just look at him like weirdly because they don't understand him. He becomes a total stranger to himself. After some point, they don't even let him talk. His lawyer just keeps on instead of him, and they don't even ask about him. They just make assumptions about his soul, about his intention. The judge thinks that he planned the murder, but he didn't. And we see this in the book, and he says it himself. He doesn't lie, he doesn't pretend. It's a super absurd scene. And I think this is exactly what Camus was trying to capture here. And because the man, our protagonist, is so far away from himself, his own actions, and to that court, to the point where the court isn't talking about the crime itself, they are talking about what kind of person they think he is, which is straight up wrong. They don't know him, and their intention, like his intentions, just don't really match up with what he says. So, and this kind of like it's a very interesting scene, to say the least. And at the end, when we think the lawyer has managed, he says like, you'll get a residual sentence. You had like your mother was dead, you weren't feeling well, you were pushed into this, you were a good person, I think I convinced the jury, I think you're going to get off scotch-free. And the verdict comes out. He is given the death sentence. Our protagonist is given the death sentence, and suddenly people just pity him. They all go calm. everybody pities him, everybody recognizes that. And he goes back to his cell. Oh, by the way, he spent a lot of time in the cell during the trials, during the waits for the trials, during giving the confessions, talking about stuff. So he just kind of loses it. Kind of, he only has the conception of yesterday and tomorrow and today, and he just doesn't care. He doesn't think about his mom. He doesn't think about Mary. He doesn't think about any of his friends, so-called friends or people. He just thinks about the sky or the outside, and it's really interesting. And during his final days, we get the scene with okay. And during this entire time, by the way, he refuses to see the father of the prison. But one day, he just barges in and asks him, "Do you believe in God?" He says no. He's very rigid on this. And they argue. And he says, like, he just pushes him, pushes him, pushes him. And then he just kind of blows up. It just shakes the father, just yells at him, everything he has in his mind. And he thinks that, like, everything that pushed him into this, and like, he just doesn't believe in any false hopes. He doesn't believe in that he'll be saved. He doesn't believe that another trial will be held. He knows that he will die, and he doesn't hold on to anything. Not God, not afterlife, not another trial, because he knows he will die, whether at the guillotine or just normally. So he just refuses that, refuses to hold on to any false hope, and just looks in the face of death. And after the father is escorted out, he remembers his mother at the end of the book, last pages of the book. And he thinks about how his mother used to talk about his father going to watch public executions, and how he used to vomit. His father used to vomit. And he thinks about how his mother remarried, like re-engaged with a man from the care home to start anew. And he kind of sees what she was trying to do there. And in his last day, he kind of feels ready to live it all again, ready to live again at the last moments of his life, at last days of his life. And he just finds this lucid, trance-like state, trance-like understanding, and goes to sleep, refusing any hope, any false hope, and embracing the absurdity of his weird, ununderstandable, just miserable life. And he just sleeps, accepts it. Well, I think rather than giving up, trying to do something because it's not going to change, I think he's free at that moment because he takes on the absurdity, the unimaginable weirdness and unchangeability of the world, and he just lives with it. He knows he's going to die. He knows people hate him, and he knows the court wasn't about him. He knows he didn't care about killing the guy. He didn't care about Mary. He didn't love her. He knows he wasn't that affected by his mother's death, and he refused to pretend otherwise, even to his last moments. And if I'm not remembering this incorrectly, and his last hopes are that there are a lot of spectators to his death, and they just yell at him with hatred. And he just hopes this. I think Mersault reflects what a lot of us would be if we were really, really, really honest with ourselves. Because I'm not saying he's a good person. I think what Camus was trying to achieve here is that he wants us to recognize and get Mersault, or whatever, but not pity him. Because this is not a man to pity. Because he doesn't deserve pity, he doesn't ask for it, nor is there anything to pity about a situation. He killed a man, he's not a good person, and he accepted, just, you have to get this. because sometimes there is really nothing to say. For his mother's death, for example, well, yeah, you could cry, but are you crying because you are solely wanting to cry, or does society tell you to do so? Or is it like a preconceived notion that you must cry? Because it's such a weird thing. Your mother's dead. What should you think? What does that change? You killed a man. What does that change? There is no grand narrative. There is no truth here. You're going to die. What does that change? And I think that a man who isn't afraid to face these questions is the protagonist that Camus was trying to achieve here. And I think the people around him were just as indifferent, if not less considerate than compared to him. His friend Raymond, Mason, Salomon, I don't know, Mary. These people were all around him, and he didn't give them the slightest bit of hope, slightest bit of affirmation. He didn't care about them, and he actively showed this, but they still pulled him around. But he killed a person. That's the difference they have. But we must ask, what's the difference between these people? And is Mersel solely to blame here? Because nobody around him was that good anyways. He was just facing the absurdity of his life. Not that it excuses him to kill a person, but he was braver than them in this sense, at least. And the people around him saw him as a good person. That some of them told him that he was a cool guy, strong man, or a brave man. No, Mersel is not any of those. Mersel isn't anything. He is so himself. He is a person confronting the absurdity of his life, absurdity of the situation, like seeing that sometimes there is nothing to say, sometimes there is nothing to do, and his actions perfectly reflect that. This doesn't have to be good. That doesn't have to be bad. It simply is when you strip yourself of any false hopes, any false narratives. He stripped himself of God, society, even his familial bonds. He stepped so outside of the false reality that he thought was. And when he saw all of it, the grand scheme, not like he didn't see the grand scheme, but when he saw everything without any prejudice, I think that's what anybody would react like. If we could drop everything that we have about this world, I think a lot of us will be reacting the same as him. Maybe not behave the same way, but we will definitely resemble him. And I think he was a free person at the very end, because he was able to live again despite nothing to hold on to and no meaning to live on with at his last days. And I think that's brilliant. I will definitely 100%, 1000% recommend this book. I will check out Camus' other work as well. I've read The Myth of Sisyphus, and I will do another video on that, but I just read this, so I thought I might make a video. And if I were to talk about how it emotionally impacted me, well, I get the protagonist. I get the main character, because I kind of feel the same way towards the world. I just kind of go along with it sometimes. Maybe I differ from him, but I get him. And since I get him, I don't pity him the tiniest bit. I don't feel angry at him the not tiniest bit. So, and to talk about the other characters, I think the other characters are just super well written, but they also neglected to see how his the main character's situation was being impacted. Mary dated a person and wanted to marry a person that she knew didn't like her. And Raymond was forcing him to write letters in his own name and kind of pulled him into the Arabian gangster business. And the courtroom with the judges and whole just wanted to talk about what they had in their mind, that preconception, that narrative, and they were angry at him for not having a reason. If he said he was angry at the Arabian guy, they would forgive him. They wouldn't give him the death sentence. But he wasn't. He didn't have a reason. And perhaps that was the reason they got also angry. Because we are afraid. Because we are afraid to face the absurdity of some stuff in this world. It was absurd that he killed the Arabian guy, and they are afraid to see that. They would rather think he's a sinner, a bad person, a bad soul, than admit that it was a totally absurd, unnecessary, ununderstandable, and no meaningful act that he killed that guy. Because we are afraid to drop our grand narratives or grand understandings of the world and just accept absurdity and accept that there is simply no meaning in some actions. And the judges, the newspapers, the jury perfectly reflect that. They're angry at him because of what they think he is, and they don't want to accept the reality that he tells them. Not that he will be forgiven, but they just wanted to believe otherwise. And even his lawyer did. Even his lawyer shaped it like it had some meaning, that he was broken about his mom, that he was a good soul, that he was irritated, that he wasn't feeling well. It wasn't any of those. It wasn't. They created a narrative in their mind. Everybody around him created a narrative in their mind and refused to accept the absurdity of some things. And he didn't. And in some way, he was the most free of them all, despite the one being imprisoned and killed. Thank you for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed my commentary and analysis on the characters. I know it was a bit messy. I went over the book, the story, really quickly, but I tried to mention the key points that I found helpful or important. Anyway, if you have any commentary, any thoughts, any criticisms, or anything else, or any books that you would like to recommend to me, make sure to comment them. And again, I hope you enjoyed the video. I'll see you next time. Bye bye.